Move to the
Move
back.
to the back!
Jang Myung didn't shout it. She didn't even look at Yewande when she said it. She just walked straight to the front passenger door of the black SUV, pulled it open like it belonged to her, and stood there, hand on the frame, chin lifted, like the whole world had already agreed and was simply waiting for Yewande to catch up. Yewande Abioye did not move. She stood on the front steps of her own house, the one she had spent 3 weekends painting the kitchen of before they moved in, the one that had her art on the walls and her spices in the cabinet and her whole life built into every corner of it. She stood there on those steps, and she looked at this woman, this small, silk-wearing, soft-spoken, 70-year-old woman who had been sleeping in her guest room for 7 months now, eating her food, using her towels, was sitting in her living room every evening like she had always been there, and Yewande was the one who needed to earn her place. Something shifted in Yewande's chest. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter and older than anger. Something that had been holding its breath for a very long time. "Excuse me," Yewande said. Myung finally turned and looked at her. And that look, Lord, that look. It started at Yewande's face and traveled downward, slowly, deliberately, past her neck, her shoulders, her chest, her stomach, all the way down and back up again, the way you assess something you have already placed, the way you look at something you have already decided about. "The back seat," Myung said. Her English was careful and accented, each word chosen like she was spending money on it. "There is more room for you back there. You will be comfortable." More comfortable. Those 2 words had been used on Yewande before. This was the 4th time. The front door opened behind them. Jang Woo-sung stepped out. He was tall and broad, and he moved the way dangerous men move, like there was no hurry because the world would wait for him. Dark coat, no scarf. The kind of man who had never once in his life admitted to being cold. He had his phone in one hand and the car keys in the other, and he stopped the moment he saw the scene in front of him. His eyes found Yewande first. They always found Yewande first. Then they moved to his mother, then back to Yewande. He closed his phone, slowly. "Yama." His voice was quiet, that specific kind of quiet that men like him used instead of shouting, because it worked better. "Get in the back." Myung turned to her son with the expression she had been perfecting for 40 years, wounded, dignified, quietly baffled that the person she loved most in the world kept choosing wrong. "I always sit in front. You know this, Woo-sung. I have always—" "My wife sits in front," he said. "You know this, too. She would be more comfortable in the back. There is so much more." "Yama." That was it. One word. The conversation was over. Myung released the door. She smoothed her coat with both hands, a slow, precise movement that said she was the one being inconvenienced here. And she walked to the back door with her head high and her spine straight, and every inch of her performing a woman absorbing an injustice with extraordinary grace. She got in. The door closed. Woo-sung walked around to Yewande's side and opened the door himself and held it and looked at her. His eyes said, "I see you. I have always seen you. You are not invisible to me." Yewande got in. Nobody spoke for the first 15 minutes of the drive. Chicago moved past the windows in January gray. The lake somewhere behind the buildings, the city cold and committed to itself, the way Chicago always was in winter. Woo-sung drove with one hand on the wheel and the other on Yewande's. He didn't speak. His hand on hers said everything that needed to be said right now. In the back seat, Myung sat with her hands folded in her lap and her face arranged into the expression of a woman who was suffering beautifully and wanted no acknowledgement of it. Yewande looked out her window and thought about the first time, the second, the third. When she thought about 7 months of mornings at her own breakfast table being told she was too much and not enough at the same time, she thought about every comment she had swallowed, every tear she had cried in the shower so nobody could hear. Every morning she had gotten up and decided to choose grace. She thought, something has to give today. I can feel it. She was right. Something was about to give. She just didn't know yet that by the time this day was over, everything she thought she understood about the people in this car would be different. Because Woo-sung was quiet for a reason that had nothing to do with the car seat. He knew something. He had known it for 2 weeks, and he had not told her. Before we go any further, hit that like button and subscribe now. Let me tell you who Yewande Abioye actually was. Not who Mi-young had decided she was. Not the version that had been quietly constructed over 7 months in whispered phone calls and pointed looks and carefully placed words. Not that woman. The real one. Yewande was 36 years old. She'd come from Lagos to Chicago at 17 with her parents, 2 younger siblings, 2 suitcases, and a mother who held her hand on the plane and said, "Baby, there is a difference between surviving and building. I need you to build." Yewande had built. She worked 2 jobs through community college, a coffee shop in the morning and a beauty supply store in the evenings. And she transferred to a 4-year university on a partial scholarship and filled the gap herself. She graduated with a business degree and spent 4 years working in cosmetics distribution, learning the industry from every angle. Learning what sold and what didn't and why. Learning which women were being ignored by the market and how much money was sitting in that gap, uncollected, because nobody had bothered to show up for them. Then she took $3,000 she had saved and started Rue Beauty in her kitchen on a Wednesday night. Natural hair care. For women like her, women whose hair the beauty industry had spent decades treating as a problem to be managed rather than a texture to be loved. The first year was brutal. The second was hard. The third was the year she sat on her kitchen floor at 2 in the morning, surrounded by product samples and failed packaging prototypes and a spreadsheet that was not adding up and thought about quitting. Really thought about it. Felt the full weight of what she was trying to do and questioned whether she was the person to do it. She got up off that floor. She made coffee. She opened the spreadsheet and found the error and fixed it and went to bed at 4 a.m. and was up again at 7. She never sat on that floor again. 7 years later, Rue Beauty had 22 employees, 47,000 active subscribers on their online store, a deep conditioning butter called Rue Gold that was now sitting on shelves in 3 national retail chains, deals she had negotiated herself, across tables where she was always the only woman in the room who looked like her, and she had not once flinched or shrunk or made herself smaller to make anyone else more comfortable. She was full-figured, dark-skinned, natural-haired, and she had decided a long time ago in a bathroom mirror in a shared apartment in Pilsen that she was going to take up every inch of space she had been given, and she was going to do it on purpose. This was the woman Jang Mi-young had looked at and decided was not enough. This was the woman she had spent 7 months trying to grind down into someone who doubted herself. She had picked the wrong woman. Jang Woo-sung had not planned to fall in love at a product launch event in the West Loop on a Thursday night. He was there to collect on a favor. The host owed him something, a business matter, nothing dramatic, and this event was the easiest place to collect it without making it into more than it was. He had planned to stay 45 minutes. He had a car waiting outside, and he had 3 calls to return and a situation in Seoul that needed his attention before midnight. He had a life that required him at all times. And then he saw her. Purple dress. Full natural hair that she wore like a crown she had stopped apologizing for. Standing near the window with a drink in her hand, laughing at something the bartender had just said. And not a polite laugh, not the kind of laugh women do at events like this when they want to seem approachable, but a real one. Head back. Whole face. The laugh of someone who had genuinely found something funny and was not going to pretend otherwise. The room was full of people performing wealth, performing ease, performing the kind of confidence that is really just expensive clothing and good lighting. This woman was not performing anything. She was simply there, fully, solidly, unapologetically there, her whole body present, her whole self present. And it stopped him mid-step in a way that had never happened to him before. He was not a man who got stopped. He moved toward her before he made the decision to. She saw him coming and was not impressed. In a room where Jang Woo-sung moving in your direction meant something, this woman simply waited to see what he would do next. Her eyes said, I know what you are. Show me something I haven't seen before. One conversation, he said. If I waste your time, you can leave. She looked at him for a moment. A real look, not a performed one. One conversation, she said. He left the event at midnight. He had been there for 4 hours. He had not returned a single call. That was how it started. 4 months later, he sat across from her at their kitchen table. The apartment he had taken her to see on their 7th date, the one she had walked through slowly and said yes, this one. I can feel myself in this one. And he told her the truth. All of it. Not a sanitized version, not the businessman cover story, the Jang organization. What it was, what it touched, what it cost to be close to it. He told her because she deserved the full picture. He had decided that if she was going to be in his life, she was going to be in it with open eyes or not at all. She listened to everything without her face changing once. When he finished, she was quiet for a real moment. Then she said, "So when you say you'll protect me, you mean it in a very literal sense." "Yes," he said. She thought about it. 30 full seconds of actual thinking. And then, good, we understand each other. He had proposed on a Sunday morning in the kitchen while she was making eggs, not in a restaurant, not with a speech, because she had told him once that grand gestures made her feel like she was being performed at rather than loved. He had gotten down on one knee in front of the stove. She had looked down at him with the spatula still in her hand. "You couldn't wait until I finished cooking." "No," he said. She said yes. 18 months of marriage. A home that was completely, entirely theirs. Her art on every wall, his books on every shelf. A kitchen they had painted together on a Saturday afternoon, arguing cheerfully about the right shade of white. A bedroom where he reached for her in the dark every night without announcement or drama. Or just the quiet certainty of a man who had made a permanent decision. He loved her in the specific way of a person who had spent most of their life in rooms full of performance and had finally found someone who never performed anything. He would burn down cities for her. This was the man Mi-young thought she could redirect. She had never understood that Woo Sing's love for Yewande was not a mistake he could be shown out of. It was the most deliberate decision he had ever made. Jang Mi-young arrived on a Thursday in June with 4 large suitcases, a carry-on, and a face that gave absolutely nothing away. Woo Sung's father had died 2 years before, 38 years of marriage, and then a Tuesday morning that ended everything. Mi-young had been alone in their Seoul apartment since then, and the loneliness had grown into something she could not hold by herself. Woo Sung had asked Yewande properly. He had sat at the kitchen table with his hands flat on the surface, the posture he took when something truly mattered, and he had said, "She has nowhere to go that feels like home. I know it is a big thing to ask. Tell me what you actually think." Yewande had said yes, not because she had to, because she meant it. She had bought fresh flowers for the guest room. She had found Korean pear candies at a specialty store on the other side of the city because Woo Sung had mentioned once that his mother liked them. She had stood in the doorway of that guest room the evening before Mi-young arrived and thought, "I am going to try harder than I have ever tried with anyone." Mi-young walked through that open door. And within 2 weeks she had begun, quietly and methodically, to close it from the inside. It started with the spice rack. Yewande kept it organized by how often she used things. The oils and the peppers and the everyday seasonings at the front, the specialty things at the back. One morning she came down to find it reorganized alphabetically. She put it back. 3 days later it was alphabetical again. She put it back again. On the 3rd time she just left it. Not because it didn't matter. Because she understood instinctively that the spice rack was never about the spice rack. It was about establishing who had authority over the space. Then the towels started being folded differently. A vase Yewande had bought at an art fair years ago, before Woo Sung, before any of this. Or just something she had loved and carried with her through 3 apartments. Disappeared from the hallway table and was replaced with a small ceramic figure Mi-young had produced from her luggage. Yewande moved her vase back. The ceramic appeared on the kitchen windowsill. Small moves, quiet moves, the kind that each individually meant nothing and together meant everything. And through all of it, Mi-young maintained a face of absolute calm. Then the words started. It was a Tuesday in August, 7 in the morning. Yewande was at the kitchen table eating breakfast before a meeting. Yogurt, fresh mango, a piece of toast, and reviewing notes on her tablet. She was completely minding her own business. Mi-young came into the kitchen. She looked at Yewande's bowl. She looked at Yewande's body. And she sat down across from her with the manner of a woman about to do something kind. "I want to say something to you," she said, "as a mother, because I care about this family and I care about my son's future." Yewande looked up from her tablet. "You are eating too much sugar," Mi-young said. Her voice was gentle, concerned, the voice of a doctor delivering news you need to hear. "The mango, the yogurt, this is too much sweetness for a woman who is trying to have a baby. Sugar disrupts the hormones, and the weight you are carrying—" She paused and let her eyes move across Yewande's body in that specific way that was not a look, but an assessment. "This much weight, especially here, in the middle." She gestured at Yewande's stomach. "It is smothering your reproductive system. Your womb cannot function properly when the body is working this hard just to carry itself. The hormones become confused. The cycle becomes irregular. The body simply does not have the resources left over to sustain a pregnancy." She folded her hands on the table. "I am not saying this to hurt you. I am saying this because someone in this house needs to say it. My son wants children. He deserves children. And I am trying to help you give them to him while you still have time." She said all of this in the calm, measured tone of a woman reading from a medical textbook. Yewande put her spoon down. She sat completely still. Inside her chest, something was screaming. Something hot and righteous and furious was pressing against her ribcage, wanting out. But on her face, there was nothing. She had spent her entire adult life training her face to be still when the world tried to crack it. Boardrooms, negotiations, every room where someone had looked at her and decided she was not quite what they were expecting. Her face had learned to be a wall. "Thank you for the concern," she said. "I'll keep it in mind." She finished her breakfast. She closed her tablet. She went to her meeting. She closed a deal that afternoon that added a new retail partnership worth more money than Mi-young's sole apartment. She did not tell anyone. She drove home in silence. She cried in the shower that night where nobody could hear. She stood under the hot water and let herself feel it. The full humiliation of sitting at her own breakfast table and being told her body was broken. Then she turned the water off and dried her face and went to bed. And she did not tell Woo-sung. She told herself, one time. It was one time. She is grieving and afraid, and she doesn't understand what she is saying. Give her grace. Be bigger than this. But it was not one time. The next week, a woman's body is a vessel, Yewande. A vessel must be clean and light to carry something precious. I look at you and I see a vessel that has been overburdened. It is not a judgment. It is simply what I see. The week after that, my son has sacrificed so much. He carries this entire organization on his shoulders. The very least his wife can do is take care of her body. Discipline yourself. Eat less. Move more. Give your womb a chance to breathe. Is that too much? The week after that, there is a woman in Seoul, Mrs. Park's daughter. Her name is Soo-yeon. Beautiful girl, slim, very traditional, very devoted. She has been in love with Woo-sung since they were both teenagers. A pause, a small smile. I mention it only so you understand that my son is a man with choices. He chose you. Do not give him reason to regret it. That one stopped Yewande cold. That one was not a comment about her body. That was a threat. Delivered with a smile, wrapped in silk, but a threat. She sat in the living room after Mi-young walked out and stared at the wall and felt something shift. Not just hurt now, something sharper, something alert. This woman was not just cruel. This woman had a plan. And 2 days later, Yewande found the proof. It was a Thursday evening. Woo-sung was out. Yewande was walking past Mi-young's room when she noticed the door was slightly open. She was not snooping. She was not looking for anything. She was walking past on her way to the linen closet and the door was open and a piece of paper had slipped off the side table near the door and was sitting on the floor half in and half out of the room. She picked it up to put it back. She looked at it without meaning to. It was a printed flight itinerary, Chicago O'Hare, arriving in 3 weeks, 1 passenger, Park Soo-yeon. Yewande stood in the hallway with that piece of paper in her hand and read the name 3 times. Then she put it back exactly where it had been, on the floor, half in and half out, and walked to the linen closet and got the towels she had come for and went back upstairs. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. Soo-yeon, the woman from Seoul, the slim, traditional, devoted woman that Mi-young had mentioned with that small smile. She was coming to Chicago. 3 weeks. Mi-young had booked a flight for her. Yewande sat on her bed and breathed carefully and thought about what this meant, about what kind of woman flies a specific person from Seoul to Chicago without telling her son, about what she was planning, about what she expected to happen when Soo-yeon arrived. She thought about months of comments about her body being broken, her womb being suffocated, her size making her unfit to carry a child. She thought, this woman has not been trying to help me. She has been trying to replace me. She decided not to say a word, not yet. She was going to let Mi-young finish building her own trap. The lunch at Do Kyung-hwan's house was meant to be a good day. Kyung-hwan was Woo-sung's oldest associate, a man who had been with the organization since before Woo-sung took over, and who had survived every dangerous transition through a combination of absolute loyalty and excellent judgment. His wife Sora had called Yewande herself. I am making the short ribs. You have to come. Non-negotiable. Yewande had been looking forward to it all week. Sora was one of the few people in Woo-sung's world who felt like a real person rather than a position. She was warm and direct and had been a pianist before she became someone's wife and had never stopped being a pianist just because she became someone's wife. The drive was 35 minutes. Mi-young sat in the back seat in her performance of wounded dignity. Woo-sung drove with his hand on Yewande's, and his jaw set in a way she couldn't quite read. She didn't know that Kyung-hwan had called Woo-sung that morning. She didn't know what he had said. The lunch was extraordinary. Sora had made japchae and galbi and banchan and the short ribs that had been braising since 7 in the morning. Deep, patient, complex, the kind of dish that communicated love through the hours it required. Yewande took her first bite and closed her eyes. Sora laughed with pure delight. They talked for 2 hours about Rue beauty, about Chicago, about what it meant to be a woman on the edges of a world that was not designed around women. Sora leaned forward at one point and said, "The key is knowing what is yours, what belongs only to you. For me, it is the piano. Every morning, 1 hour before the day becomes his day. That hour is mine. It keeps me whole." She looked at Yewande. "For you, it is the company. Yes?" "Yes," Yewande said. "Hold on to it, no matter what happens. Hold on to the thing that was yours before he was yours." Yewande heard those words and stored them somewhere deep. She did not know yet how much she would need them before the week was out. After lunch, Sora pressed the short rib recipe into her hands on a folded piece of paper. "Come back in April," she said at the garden door. "You will see what this garden becomes." Yewande said she would. She meant it. 20 minutes into the drive home, she was telling Woo-sung about the recipe. Sora's instruction was patience with the sauce. Let it reduce all the way, don't rush it. When Mi-young's voice came from the back, "You don't need more recipes." Yewande stopped mid-sentence. "What you need," Mi-young said in that calm, clinical voice she kept for these moments, "is to stop eating so much. That is the honest truth that nobody in this house is brave enough to say to you. Look at yourself, Yewande. Really look. You go to other people's homes and you sit at their tables and you eat and you enjoy yourself and you act as if everything is fine. And then you come home and you cannot give my son a child and you wonder why." She paused. "I will tell you why. Your body is exhausted. It is using every resource it has just to maintain all of this weight. Your womb is buried under layers of fat. It is not getting the blood it needs. It is not getting the space it needs. A baby needs a clean, healthy, disciplined environment to grow. What you are offering it is not that. I have watched you for 7 months. I know what I see. And what I see is a woman who is eating herself out of her own future. The car went absolutely silent. Not a single sound. Not a breath. Woo-sung pulled over. No drama. No swerving. He simply moved to the curb like a man who had made a very calm decision and put the car in park and turned off the music and sat there with both hands on the wheel. 5 full seconds of silence. Then he turned around in his seat. "Yama." It was not loud. It was the opposite of loud. It was the voice he used when a situation had moved past the point where volume was relevant. "Woo-sung, I was only being Stop talking." Quiet absolute. "You are going to listen to me, every single word, and you will not open your mouth until I am finished." Mi-young closed her mouth. In the front seat, Yewande looked straight ahead through the windshield. Her hands were folded in her lap. She was not going to cry. She had made herself a promise about that. 7 months, Woo-sung said. 7 months you have sat in my wife's house and eaten her food and slept in her sheets. And in those 7 months you have told her that her body is broken. You have told her she is too fat to carry a child. You have told her her womb is buried under fat. You have told her her body is not a clean enough environment for a baby. You have moved her out of the front seat of her own car 4 times. 4 times, Iyama. And today you sat in this car and told her she was eating herself out of her own future. His voice didn't rise once. It stayed exactly the same. That was what made it devastating. I want you to understand something. I need you to hear every word of this. Yewande's body is not broken. Yewande's body is none of your business. What happens or does not happen in our marriage is between me and my wife. Not you. It has never been you. It will never be you. Mi-young's eyes were filling. She was fighting it. I know you are hurting, Woo-sung said, quieter now. I know Appa is gone and the world you understood disappeared with him. I know this city is not yours, and this house is not arranged the way you would arrange it, and the woman I chose is not who you imagined. I know all of that. He paused. But your pain does not give you the right to dismantle my wife inside our own home. Not with words, not with anything. This is the last time I will say this to you. He turned back to face the road. Mi-young looked at Yewande. Yewande turned and looked back at her. Not angry, not pleading, just present. The full, steady, unashamed presence of a woman who had heard every word and was still sitting exactly where she was. Mi-young spoke in Korean. The Woo-sung said quietly, "She says she was trying to help. She says she understands now that is not what she was doing." "Tell her," Yewande said, "that I have never tried to take her son from her. I have only ever tried to be his wife." Mi-young heard it. She nodded. Once. Small. The first honest thing she had given Yewande in 7 months. Woo-sung pulled back into traffic. Yewande took one long breath. She thought, maybe the worst is over. But when they got home, there was a car in the driveway that had not been there when they left. A black car. A driver standing outside it. And on the front steps of Yewande's house, sitting with a small suitcase beside her and a face arranged into the practiced expression of a woman who had been told to look natural. A young Korean woman. Slim. Polished. Expensive coat. She stood up the moment the SUV pulled in. Yewande recognized her before anyone said a word. She didn't know the face, but she knew the situation. She had found the flight itinerary. She had stored the name. She had been waiting 3 weeks for this moment, and she had told herself she was prepared for it. She was not prepared for it. Woo-sung! The woman's face lit up. Genuine delight. The delight of someone who had been told this reunion was a good thing. "It is so good to see you. Your mother said you were expecting me." Woo-sung stopped walking. The sentence hung in the air. "Your mother said you were expecting me." He turned slowly and looked at Mi-young, who had gotten out of the back of the SUV and was now standing very still with the expression of a woman who had just watched her plan arrive 3 minutes earlier than she had prepared for. "Soo-yeon," Woo-sung said. His voice was careful. "I was not told you were coming." The young woman's face changed. Confusion first, then something close to embarrassment. She looked at Mi-young. "But you said, Mrs. Jang, you said he was expecting—" "Come inside," Mi-young said quickly, moving toward the door. "Come inside and we will talk. It is cold." "No." Woo-sung's voice. Nobody moved. "Nobody is going inside," he said, "until I understand what is happening on my front steps." Yewande stood beside her husband, and she was very quiet and very still. Not invisible. Present. The kind of presence that didn't require noise. And she looked at Soo-yeon, this young woman who had been flown across the world on a lie, who had gotten dressed this morning thinking she was walking into a welcome, and felt something unexpected. Not rage at Soo-yeon, rage at the woman who had used her. Soo-yeon was looking between Woo-sung and Mi-young and beginning to understand that she had been placed in the middle of something she had not agreed to be placed in. Her face was going pink. "Mrs. Jang told me you were hoping to see old friends from Seoul. She said you would be happy." "Soo-yeon." Woo-sung's voice was not unkind. "I am going to ask my driver to take you to a hotel. I will make sure you are comfortable. This is not your fault. I need you to understand that." He turned to his driver and spoke quietly, and the driver nodded and moved to assist Soo-yeon with her suitcase. Soo-yeon looked at Mi-young one more time. Mi-young did not meet her eyes. The car pulled away. The four of them, Woo-sung, Yewande, Mi-young, and the enormous thing that had just happened, stood on the driveway. "Inside," Woo-sung said. They went inside. What happened in that living room in the next 20 minutes, Yewande had not been prepared for, not because of what Woo-sung said to his mother, but because of what Mi-young said back. They sat in the living room. Or rather, Woo-sung and Yewande sat. Mi-young stood near the window with her back slightly turned, the way she arranged herself when she was building a defense. "You flew her here," Woo-sung said. Mi-young said nothing. "You booked a flight. You told her I was expecting her. Like you arranged for her to arrive at my house while I was not home." He leaned forward. "Tell me I am missing something. Tell me there is a part of this I have not understood correctly." Mi-young turned from the window, and what she said next was not what either of them expected. "Yes," she said, "I did it. I arranged it, and I would do it again." The room went very still. "You would do it again," Woo-sung repeated. "I am your mother," Mi-young said. Her voice was not apologetic. It was something else entirely. The voice of a woman who had made a decision and was prepared to stand behind it. "I am the person who has loved you your entire life. I am the person who gave up everything. My own dreams, my own future, my own—" She stopped. Something flickered across her face, a door opening and closing in 1 second. "I have given everything to make sure you had the best life possible, and I have watched you, for 2 years, for this entire marriage. I have watched you settle." "Settle," Woo-sung said. "She cannot give you children," Mi-young said, and she looked directly at Yewande now. 7 months. I have watched her for 7 months. Nothing, and it is not going to happen. Look at her, Woo-sung. Her body is not built for—" "Stop." Yewande's voice was quiet, but something in it made Mi-young stop. "You have said enough about my body. You have said more than enough about my body for 7 months. I am asking you to stop, not for my sake, for yours." Mi-young's eyes narrowed. "For my sake." "Yes," Yewande said, "because you are standing in my living room telling me what my body can and cannot do. And I need you to think carefully about whether you are the right person to be saying that." Something shifted in Mi-young's face. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Yewande said slowly, "that I found the flight itinerary 3 weeks ago. I know you booked that flight. I know you have been speaking to Mrs. Park in Seoul. I know about Soo-yeon." She paused. And I know that a woman who goes to this much trouble, this much deliberate, planned, coordinated trouble, to remove someone from a marriage, that woman is not doing it just because she wants grandchildren. She looked at Mi-young directly. That woman is afraid of something much deeper than that, and I have been trying to figure out what it is for 7 months. The room was silent. Mi-young looked at Yewande for a long time. And then she said something that cracked the whole foundation of the last 7 months. "You are too comfortable," Mi-young said. Her voice was strange now, low. "You are too comfortable in your body, too comfortable in your skin. You walk into rooms like you have the right to be there. You laugh too loud. You take up too much space. You are not afraid of anything." Her jaw tightened. "I have never in my life been that way. Not once. Not one day. And you just are. Without trying. Without apology. And She stopped. She turned back to the window. "I hated you for it," she said, quietly, like she was confessing something she had not planned to confess. "From the first day, I hated you for being everything I was never allowed to be." The room was absolutely silent. Yewande looked at this woman's back, at the rigid set of her shoulders, at the cost of what she had just said. "Mi-young," Woo-sung said. "Don't," Mi-young said. "Just don't. Not yet." And then from the hallway came a sound, the front door, and a voice that none of them were expecting. "Mi-young, I let myself in. The door wasn't Mrs. Han stopped in the doorway of the living room. She was Mi-young's older sister, 68 years old. She had flown in from Seoul that morning. A surprise visit. She had texted Woo-sung 2 days ago that she wanted to see him, that she had been meaning to come for months. He had said come. The timing was fine. He had not mentioned it to Mi-young because he had wanted it to be a surprise. Mrs. Han stood in the doorway and looked at the three of them. The silence in the room, Mi-young's back turned to the window, Woo-sung's face, the Yewande's stillness, and understood immediately that she had walked into something. "I'm sorry," she said. "I can come back." "Emo," Woo-sung said. "Come in, please." She came in slowly. She looked at her sister. "Mi-young, what is happening? Your face." "It's nothing," Mi-young said, turning from the window. "Family discussion. It is handled." "It is not handled," Woo-sung said. He looked at his aunt. "Emo, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. You have always been honest with me, and I am asking you not to stop now." Mrs. Han looked at Mi-young, a look between sisters that carried 40 years of history. Mi-young's face went very still. "My mother," Woo-sung said, "has spent 7 months telling my wife that her body is the reason we don't have children yet, that she is too large, that her womb is buried, that her body is not a suitable environment for a baby. She has said this over and over, and I need to understand something." He paused. "Where is that coming from? What is she actually afraid of? Because today she stood in this room and said she hated my wife for being comfortable in her own body, for not being afraid. And I need to understand why not being afraid is something to hate." Mrs. Han looked at her sister. Mi-young took 1 step forward. "Hanunni, don't. Mi-young, don't. Please. After everything. After all these years, don't." Mrs. Han looked at Woo-sung, and then she looked at Yewande, at this woman who had been standing in the middle of a storm for 7 months that she had never agreed to stand in. This woman who was looking back at her with steady, patient eyes. Mrs. Han closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she said it. "Your mother cannot have children, Woo-sung." The room went electric. She never could. From the time she was young, the doctors told her it was not possible. She and your father tried for years, years of treatments, years of hoping, years of grief that she never spoke about to anyone except me. Her voice was careful and sad. "You were adopted at 3 days old, a baby boy whose mother was very young and could not keep him. Your parents chose you. They loved you from the first moment, and they made a promise. Your father and your mother and I, we made a promise that you would never know, that you would grow up as their son completely, that the word adopted would never touch you. Nobody breathed. We kept that promise for 41 years, Mrs. Hahn said. I have kept it every day of my life, but I am standing here watching my sister. Her voice broke slightly. Watching my sister tell your wife that her body is broken and insufficient and unfit to carry a child. Saying those words, those exact words, words that people said to her, words that destroyed something in her that never fully healed. She looked at Myung. How could you, Myung-ah, after everything you went through? How could you look at that girl and say those things? Myung stood absolutely still. Every wall she had built over 40 years was standing in this moment and also collapsing in this moment simultaneously. Woo-sung turned to look at his mother. His face. Nobody who saw his face in that moment would ever forget it. 41 years old, he had never known. Not one day. Not 1 hour. He had grown up certain of who he was and where he came from, and now the floor beneath all of it had shifted, and he was standing on something completely different. Is it true? He said. Myung could not speak. She nodded. I was adopted. Another nod. Smaller. You could not have children. A breath. No, she whispered. I never could. The room was so quiet you could hear the traffic outside. Chicago going about its business completely unaware. And for 7 months, Woo-sung said, very slowly and very carefully, you sat in this house and told my wife that her body was broken, that she was too fat to carry a child, that her womb was buried under fat, that she was eating herself out of her future, that she was not a suitable vessel. He stopped. You said those things. You, a woman who has never once in her life been pregnant. Myung's hands were shaking. She looked at her son and then she looked away because looking at him was too much. I was ashamed, she said. It came out cracked and small, nothing like her usual voice. My whole life, my whole adult life, I was ashamed of what my body could not do. I hid it from everyone, even from your father's family, even from people who should have known. I built an entire life around making sure nobody knew. She stopped, and then I came here and I saw her. I saw how she moves through the world, how she takes up space without apology, how she is not afraid of her own body, not afraid of what people think of it, not diminished by anyone's opinion of it, and her voice broke. I just hated her for it. I hated that she had the thing I never had, and I wanted to take it from her. Yewande stood in the center of the room. She had wanted this moment for 7 months. She had imagined some version of it. The truth coming out, the mask coming off, the full picture finally visible. She had thought she would feel vindicated. She felt something else entirely. She felt the weight of what a secret can do to a person when they carry it alone for 40 years. She felt the terrible, twisted shape that shame takes when it has nowhere to go. She felt something she had not expected to feel for Jang Myung. She felt grief, not for herself, for the young woman Myung had been, sitting in doctors' offices being told her body was insufficient, for the 40 years of hiding it, for the way that hidden shame had slowly poisoned everything around it until it became a 70-year-old woman flying in a stranger from Seoul and telling her daughter-in-law that her womb was buried under fat. Yewande walked across the room. She stopped in front of Myung. Myung looked up. I am not going to tell you what you did was acceptable, Yewande said, because it was not. The things you said to me, about my body, about my womb, about my size, those things will not unhappen. I am going to be carrying them for a long time. I want you to know that. Myung nodded. But I also want you to know, Yewande said, that I understand what shame does to a person. I am a fat black woman in America. I have been told my whole life that my body is a problem, by doctors, by strangers, by society, and I know exactly what it feels like to be told your body is insufficient. She paused. The difference between us is that I refuse to believe it, and somewhere along the way you decided to punish me for that refusal." Mi-young looked at this woman, this full, unafraid, unbowed woman who was standing in front of her, and handed her the most honest thing anyone had said to her in 40 years. And for the first time since she had arrived in Chicago, she actually saw her. Not a problem, not an obstacle, a person. "I'm sorry," Mi-young said. It came out like something that had been kept in a locked room for a very long time. "I know," Yewande said. She stepped back. She looked at Woo-sung. He was looking at his mother with a face that held so many things at once. Grief for what he had just learned, anger at what had been done to his wife, love for the woman who had raised him, loss for a father who had kept this secret and was no longer here to explain why. "I need some air," Woo-sung said. He walked out of the living room. The front door opened, closed. Mrs. Han went to Mi-young and put her arms around her sister. Mi-young, who had not let a tear fall in front of anyone in 40 years, buried her face in her sister's shoulder and finally, completely let go. Yewande walked upstairs. She walked to the bathroom and closed the door and sat on the edge of the tub and sat with everything that had just happened. The car seat, 7 months of comments, Soo-yeon on the driveway, the living room, Mrs. Han's voice saying you were adopted at 3 days old. She sat with all of it, and then she remembered something. She had been meaning to take a test for 4 days. She had been putting it off because the last 3 times she had taken one, the result had been negative, and she was tired of preparing herself and then having to mourn quietly by herself. She had bought the test. It was under the bathroom sink. She had been talking herself out of taking it every morning for 4 days. She opened the cabinet under the sink. The box was there. She sat on the edge of the tub for a long moment. Then she took the test. She set it on the counter. She stood at the bathroom mirror and looked at herself while she waited. Her face, her shoulders, her arms, her chest, her stomach. This body that had been called broken and buried and insufficient and overburdened and unsuitable and everything else for 7 months. And this body that she had refused to be ashamed of, even when every voice in the house was telling her she should be. She looked at herself, and then she looked down at the counter, and then she looked back up at the mirror, and she stood there for a very long time without moving, because the test was positive. 2 clear lines, no question, no ambiguity. Yewande Abioye, the woman who had been told for 7 months that her body was broken, that her womb was buried, that her fat was suffocating her organs, that she was eating herself out of her own future, was pregnant. She pressed both hands flat on the bathroom counter and looked at herself in the mirror, and she started to laugh. Not a polite laugh, not a quiet laugh, a real one. The kind that started somewhere deep and moved all the way up through her chest and out into the room. And the laugh of a woman who had absorbed months, years of cruelty about her body and was standing in her own bathroom on the other side of all of it, holding the proof that her body had known exactly what it was doing the entire time. She laughed until she cried. Then she cried until she was done. Then she washed her face. She picked up the test. She looked at it one more time. She opened the bathroom door. Downstairs, she could hear the house settling into something different. Mi-young's crying had quieted. Mrs. Han's voice low and steady. The front door opening. Woo-sung coming back in. Yewande stood at the top of the stairs. She thought about going down, about walking into that living room and holding up the test and letting the moment be what it was. The ultimate answer to 7 months of cruelty. The perfect, irrefutable, biological response to everything Mi-young had said. She thought about it, and then she thought, no, this was not Mi-young's news. This was not a weapon. This was not the answer to a war. This was hers. This was hers and Woo-sung's. She was not going to turn the most important moment of her life into a point she was making. She heard Woo-sung's footsteps on the stairs. He came up and found her standing at the top of the stairs with something in her hand and her eyes still slightly red and a look on her face that he had never seen before. "Hey," he said, "are you—" She held out the test. He looked at it. He looked at her. He sat down on the top stair. just sat down, right there on the floor, like his legs had made a decision without consulting him. "Yewande," he said. "I know," she said, and he looked up at her from the floor with a face that was completely, entirely undone. Yang Wusung, who had sat across from dangerous men in different countries and never once shown what he was feeling, was sitting on his own staircase with his face completely open. She sat down beside him. They sat there together on the top step of their stairs, with the test between them and the sound of the house around them and everything that had happened today settling into its new shape. "She was wrong," he said finally, quietly, "about your body, about all of it." "I knew she was wrong," Yewande said. "I knew it every single day." He took her hand. They sat there for a long time without speaking. Outside, Chicago was dark and cold and going about its evening. Inside this house, on these stairs, when a woman who had refused to be broken was sitting with the proof that she never had been, Wusung must now sit with the truth of his own adoption and decide what it means for who he is and who his mother is to him. Mi Young must face her son, her sister, and the full weight of what she chose to do with her shame instead of healing it. And Yewande Abioye, who knew her body was not broken, who never stopped believing it even when every voice in her house told her otherwise, is about to walk back into that living room and show everyone in this story what it looks like when a woman who refused to shrink finally gets to stand in her full height. If this story moved you, if you have ever been told your body was the problem, if you have ever had to choose grace when you wanted to choose war, if you have ever sat in a room and refused to let someone see you break, then this one was for you. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Thank you very much for staying till the end. See you soon, besties. Don't go anywhere.